Arthur's family truth. The doctor leaned in so close I could smell his coffee. He didn't raise his voice. He just spoke quietly. Keep your wife away from your son. I didn't react. I just stayed where I was, but the way he said it didn't leave. Then the door opened and he sat back like nothing had happened. At the time, nothing about it made sense, but I didn't question it. But to understand what came next, you need to know what came before. My name is Clifford Harmon. I'm 62, a retired civil engineer from Olympia, Washington. Spent 35 years reading blueprints, checking foundations, looking for the spot where a structure was about to fail. You get good at reading stress fractures. You learn to see the signs before the collapse. I was completely blind to the one happening inside my own home. Dorothy, my wife, 60 years old, started losing her memory about 4 years ago. Small things first. She'd walk into a room and stop, looking around like she'd forgotten why she came. She'd reach for a word and just miss it. She'd taught elementary school for 28 years. Sharp woman. The kind who remembered every single student's name, every parent's face, every birthday, from every class she'd ever taught. So when she started forgetting what day of the week it was, I noticed. I told myself it was age. We were both in our 60s. These things happen. Our son Lester, 38, works in commercial real estate, called me about 14 months ago when I was still wrapping up a part-time consulting project in Tacoma. He said, "Dad, you're gone too much. Let me come back for a while and help with Mom." He sounded so reasonable, so concerned. I said yes without thinking twice. He drove us to St. Catherine Medical Center that Thursday. Black SUV, leather seats, that expensive cologne he always wears. He carried his leather bag with him everywhere. Laptop, contracts, he said. I never gave it a second thought. Dr. Alan Kellner was the neurologist. 57, wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of doctor who gets straight to the point. He started Dorothy on a standard cognitive evaluation. Simple stuff on paper. What year is it? Who is the current president? Count backward from 100 by sevens. Remember these 3 words: apple, penny, table. She couldn't answer the first question without looking at me. I've sat through some hard meetings in my career. I've read structural failure reports on bridges that went down with people on them. None of that prepared me for watching my wife of 36 years look at a doctor and not be able to tell him what year it was. Dr. Kellner was patient. He kept his voice even, but I could see him making notes, and his pen was moving faster than I expected. Then he asked, "Who manages your wife's medications, Mr. Harmon?" Before I could answer, Lester spoke up from where he was standing by the window. "I do. I set up her weekly pill organizer. Blood pressure, cholesterol, a couple of vitamins. I've been handling it since I moved back." Something shifted in Dr. Kellner's face right then, just for a second. His pen stopped. He looked at me. Not at Lester, at me. "I'd like to review her complete medication history," he said. His voice was careful, flat. The kind of voice you use when you're saying one thing and meaning something else. Lester said, "Of course, whatever you need, doctor," and smiled that easy smile of his. A few minutes later, Lester's phone buzzed, or he acted like it did. He apologized and stepped out to take a call. The door clicked shut. Dr. Kellner moved fast. He leaned forward with his elbows on his knees and dropped his voice so low I had to lean in to catch it. "Mr. Harmon, the pattern of your wife's decline, the speed of it, the specific symptoms, it doesn't fit typical age-related cognitive deterioration." He glanced at the door. "I've seen this before. There are substances that produce symptoms virtually identical to dementia. Memory loss, confusion, disorientation. And if you remove the source in time, the damage can be reversed." The room felt colder. "What are you saying?" I asked. "I'm saying I need to run more tests." And I'm saying, he paused, looked at the door again. His hands were not steady. "You need to keep your wife away from your son immediately." I opened my mouth. The door swung open. Lester came back in with that same calm smile. "Sorry about that. Everything okay in here? Just going over some preliminary observations." Dr. Kellner said, and his professional face was back on like he'd never dropped it. I looked at my son standing in that doorway, 38 years old, confident, polished. The boy I'd taught to ride a bike in our driveway. The boy I'd sat with in the emergency room when he broke his arm at 9. The boy who had come home to help his mother. I smiled at him, and somewhere behind that smile, something inside me went very quiet and very cold. The drive home should have taken 30 minutes. It felt like 3 hours. Lester checked his mirrors every 90 seconds. I counted. His fingers tapped a rhythm on the steering wheel that never stopped. He made small talk about the weather, about a project he was working on, about a restaurant he wanted to try. His voice was smooth and easy, the same voice he'd used his whole life to get out of trouble. In the back seat, Dorothy hummed to herself and watched the trees go by. She'd already forgotten the tests. She'd forgotten the examination room, the questions she couldn't answer, the look on Dr. Kellner's face. She looked perfectly content. I sat in the passenger seat with my hands in my lap and said the right things at the right moments and thought about what a doctor's trembling hands look like when he's scared of saying something out loud. When we got home, Lester went straight to the kitchen, checked Dorothy's pill organizer, counted the compartments, his routine, he'd always called it. Keeping Mom on track, I watched him from the doorway and didn't say a word. I went to bed at 10, lay there staring at the ceiling. Dorothy was asleep beside me inside of 20 minutes, which she always was these days, out fast, heavy sleep, no matter what time it was. That had started about 14 months ago too, now that I thought about it, right around when Lester moved back in. I got up at 2 in the morning to get some water. The kitchen light was on. Lester was standing at the counter next to Dorothy's ceramic tea kettle. The one she uses every night before bed, chamomile. Same routine for over 20 years. He had something in his right hand. Small, dark, a vial, maybe 2 inches long. He heard me on the stairs. By the time I came through the doorway, whatever he was holding was gone, pocketed fast, and he was filling a glass of water like that's why he was standing there. Couldn't sleep, he said. Me neither, I said. We stood there for a moment. He finished his water, said good night, went upstairs. I stood alone in that kitchen for a long time. I didn't touch the tea kettle, didn't touch anything. I just stood there with the refrigerator humming and the clock ticking, and something cold spreading through my chest that I didn't have a name for yet. The next morning while Lester was out, I went through his bag, not something I'd ever done. It felt wrong even as I was doing it, but I'm an engineer. I've spent my whole career verifying what I can't see. You don't assume a foundation is solid because someone told you it is. You check. The bag was heavier than its contents explained. Laptop, papers, pens, standard stuff. But I know weight. I've been calculating load tolerances for 35 years, and this bag was carrying something extra. I found it along the interior lining. A Velcro seam that wasn't part of the original stitching, a false bottom maybe 4 inches deep inside, a small amber vial wrapped in a cloth. The label was partial, looked like it had been partially peeled, but I could read enough. Lorazepam, veterinary formula, not for human use. I set it down on the counter, picked it back up. Read it again, veterinary formula, animal tranquilizer, hidden in a false compartment in my son's bag, wrapped like something precious. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I photographed everything, the vial, the label, the compartment, the position it was sitting in, and then I put it all back exactly as I found it. Every fold of the cloth, the Velcro sealed flat, bag positioned at the same angle on the counter. Then I sat down at the kitchen table and didn't move for about 20 minutes. This is the part nobody talks about. Not the confrontation, not the evidence, not the courtroom. The 20 minutes after you find out, when it's just you in the silence and the thing you now know that you can't unknow. I thought about Lester at 9 years old, sitting in the emergency room with a broken arm, trying not to cry because he wanted to seem tough. I thought about the day he graduated college and how proud I was standing in that crowd. I thought about Dorothy at the kitchen table this morning, struggling to remember what she wanted to say mid-sentence, and I thought about how I had blamed that on age, on disease, on bad luck. I sat there with all of that, and then I stood up because sitting wasn't going to fix anything. I went next door to see Norman Pruitt. Norman is 70, retired pharmacist, lives 3 houses down. We've shared a fence line for 19 years. Good man. Quiet. The kind of person who doesn't ask questions he doesn't need the answer to. I showed him the photos on my phone. Didn't say much. Let him look. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he set the phone down on his kitchen table and looked at me. Lorazepam in those concentrations, given consistently to someone Dorothy's age over a period of months. It mimics dementia, he said. Confusion, memory loss, disorientation. You'd never know it wasn't the real thing. He paused. And Clifford, it's reversible. If you stop the exposure now, her brain can recover. I asked him how long it would take to see a difference. 48 hours, he said. Maybe less. I drove to the hardware store that afternoon and bought a new tea kettle. Same brand, same color. Close enough that no one would notice the switch. I brought the old one back to Norman's house. Evidence. That night, Dorothy made her chamomile with the new kettle. She didn't notice a thing. She sat in her chair and sipped her tea and smiled at me over the rim of the cup. The same way she has for 36 years. I smiled back and started the clock. 48 hours later, Dorothy woke up before me. I heard her in the kitchen, pans moving, the smell of bacon, then her voice humming something. I lay there for a second trying to place the melody before I realized what it was. Our wedding song. I came downstairs and she was at the stove, cracking eggs into a pan without looking, reaching for the salt without searching for it. She turned when she heard me on the stairs and smiled, not the vague, distant smile I'd been getting for over a year, the real one, the one that reaches her eyes. "Morning," she said. "I thought I'd make your favorite. You always said my scrambled eggs beat any diner in the county." I hadn't said that in years. I'd stopped saying it because she'd stopped being able to make them. I sat down at the table and watched her cook, and didn't say anything for a minute because I didn't trust my voice. Later that morning, she picked up the crossword puzzle she'd been staring at blankly for days and started filling it in. Pen, not pencil, the way she always used to. She got 6 across without hesitating, then 9 down. Then she looked up and said, "I've been thinking about calling Janet. Do you remember her? We taught together in '98. I wonder what she's been up to." Janet, a colleague from 26 years ago, a name Dorothy hadn't been able to pull up in months. I wrote everything down, times, behaviors, exact words spoken. I'd spent my career documenting load tests and stress assessments. Now I was documenting my wife coming back to life, and I was just as precise about it. I called Judith that afternoon. Our daughter is 34, a nurse at a hospital up in Seattle. When I told her everything, the vial, Norman's assessment, the switched kettle, Dorothy's improvement in less than 48 hours, she went quiet for a long time. Then, "Dad, I need to tell you something. About 5 months ago," she said, she'd been visiting for the weekend. She was looking for a phone charger and went through Lester's bag without thinking. She smelled something sharp, chemical, not cologne. She didn't know what it was. She told herself she was being paranoid. She put everything back and flew home to Seattle and didn't say anything. "I should have said something," she said. Her voice broke a little. "I should have called you." I told her she couldn't have known. I meant it. She was in her car and on the road to Olympia within the hour. That evening, I knocked on Howard Merritt's door at the end of the block. Howard is 74, spent 32 years as a homicide detective in Seattle before he retired. Quiet man, the kind who listens more than he talks, which is probably why he was good at his job. I laid out everything on his kitchen table. The photos, Norman's assessment, the timeline, Dorothy's recovery. He looked at all of it without rushing, picked up his coffee, put it back down. "Don't confront him yet," he said. "You do that now with just photos and a neighbor's opinion, and he walks, or worse, he panics." He looked at me steady. "You need medical confirmation. Blood work on Dorothy, chain of evidence. Then you go to law enforcement, not the other way around." He paused. "And Clifford. People who do this to one person in a household don't usually stop at one. Watch what you eat and drink. Don't accept anything he prepares for you without thinking about it first." That warning stayed with me. Dorothy had her blood drawn at St. Catherine the following week. Dr. Kellner called me back into his office 4 days later and spread 12 pages of lab results across his desk. "Lorazepam metabolites," he said, "consistent with regular low-dose exposure over approximately 12 to 14 months. He looked up. "This report will hold up in any courtroom. 12 to 14 months, right in line with when Lester moved back in." Then Dr. Kellner told me he'd pulled something else. A few weeks earlier, at my regular physical, I'd had routine blood work done, standard panel. He'd gone back and looked at it more carefully after seeing Dorothy's results. There were traces in mine too. Lower concentrations, more recent. His estimate, 5 to 6 months of low-level exposure, consistent with something added to a drink I consumed regularly. Morning coffee, most likely, he said. 6 more months at that dosage and you would have started showing symptoms, confusion, memory lapses, things you'd chalk up to stress or getting older. A year and you'd have needed evaluation yourself. I sat with that for a moment. 2 incapacitated parents, a house worth $650,000 retirement accounts, investment portfolio, everything managed by the one son who'd come home to help. That's when I called Russell Aldridge, elder abuse attorney, office off Capitol Way, 58 years old and sharp as anyone I've worked with. I laid out everything. He didn't blink. Elder abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted murder, both victims, he said. We file as soon as you're ready. Then Lester texted, finished early. Heading back tonight. Can you handle dinner? He wasn't supposed to be back until Tuesday. I forwarded the message to Howard. He texted back 3 words. Stay calm. Ready. Judith was already at the house. Dorothy was in the living room reading, actually reading, tracking the lines, turning pages when we heard the front door open. Lester came in carrying his bag. He stepped into the living room and stopped. He looked at Dorothy. She had a book open in her lap and her reading glasses on, and she looked up at him with a clear, steady expression that I don't think he expected. Not the foggy, gentle confusion he'd been used to seeing. Something moved across his face. Fast. Gone before you could name it. Mom looks good, he said, carefully. She's been having better days, I said. He set his bag on the kitchen counter and moved toward the cabinet where Dorothy's teas were kept. I stepped into his path without planning to. We stood there, him, me, Dorothy in the next room, Judith in the hallway behind me. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he reached past me, took a glass from the cabinet, filled it at the tap, and set it on the counter in front of me. Long drive, he said. Sit down, Dad. Have some water. I looked at the glass. I looked at my son. I did not touch it. Dorothy spoke from the doorway. She'd gotten up from her chair without either of us noticing. She was standing at the edge of the kitchen, one hand on the doorframe, looking at the glass of water on the counter. Then she looked at Lester. Don't drink that, Clifford. Her voice was quiet. Not confused. Not uncertain. Just quiet and clear, the way she used to talk to parents in her classroom when something was wrong and she didn't want to alarm the children. Lester said, Mom, you don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about, she said. I watched you at the counter. He started to say something else. Judith stepped out from the hallway and held up her phone, screen facing out. I've been recording for the last 9 minutes, she said. Every word, Lester. He looked at his sister, then at his mother, then at me. And something that had been holding him together for 14 months just gave out. I've seen it in structures before, the moment a load-bearing element fails. It doesn't always make noise. Sometimes it just drops. He sat down at the kitchen table and put his face in his hands. What came out over the next hour was this. About 18 months ago, Lester had gotten into business with a woman named Gloria Denton. She presented herself as a real estate investment partner. She had credentials, a downtown office, a track record that looked legitimate from the outside. What she actually was a predator who had been doing variations of this same thing for years. She had a fraud conviction out of Oregon from 2018, targeting an elderly couple there. Though Lester claimed he hadn't known that when they first started working together. By the time he figured out who she really was, she had recordings of him, things he'd done on earlier deals that weren't clean. She'd been building a file from the start. She gave him a choice. Help her access the Harmon family assets, the house, the accounts, everything, or she releases what she has on him. The lorazepam was her idea. She sourced it. She told him the dosages, the method, the timing. She told him to use Dorothy's nightly tea because it was reliable and undetectable, and the symptoms would look exactly like early dementia in a woman Dorothy's age. She told him to start on me a few months in slower and lighter, so that by the time anyone looked closely, both of us would seem like we were declining together. 2 confused elderly parents, a devoted son managing their affairs. Clean, that was the plan. Lester said he'd tried to slow it down, pull back, that he'd told Gloria he wanted out, and she'd reminded him what she was holding. I sat across the table from my son and listened to all of this, and I didn't say much. There wasn't a lot to say. Some part of me wanted to believe the part about trying to slow it down. I still don't know what to do with that part. Dorothy stood in the kitchen doorway the whole time. She didn't sit down. She listened with her arms crossed and her face still. And when Lester finally ran out of words, she looked at him for a long moment and said, "I'm your mother." That was all she said. Detective Carolyn Torres from the Thurston County Sheriff's Department took the case. She was thorough and fast. The lab results, Judith's recording, Norman Pruitt's professional assessment of the vial, Howard's documentation of the timeline, all of it went into a package that Russell Aldridge had already been building for days. The warrants came through on a Wednesday morning. They arrested Lester at the house. He didn't fight it. He stood in the driveway with his hands behind his back and looked at me once before they put him in the car. I don't know what he was looking for. I don't know what he saw. Gloria Denton was picked up at her apartment the same afternoon. Her attorney told the court she was a victim of Lester's manipulation. It didn't hold. She had the Oregon conviction. She had the sourcing records for the lorazepam. She had a pattern and a paper trail, and Torres had found all of it. The trial ran 3 weeks. Dorothy testified on the second Tuesday. She wore the blue dress she'd bought for our anniversary 2 years ago, the one she hadn't been able to remember buying until now. She sat in that witness chair and described 14 months of fog in clear, steady sentences. She described waking up some mornings not knowing what room she was in. She described looking at our grandchildren's faces and grasping for their names. She described what it felt like when the fog started lifting, like a window being cleaned from the outside. She said, bit by bit, the light coming back. Lester pled guilty partway through. 8 years. Gloria Denton went to trial. 10 years. The judge noted her prior conviction and the deliberate, predatory nature of the scheme. The afternoon after sentencing, Dorothy and I sat on the back porch. Just the two of us. She had a cup of chamomile, new kettle, new tea, everything new, and I had a coffee, and we didn't talk for a while. The yard needed work. The flower beds she used to keep up had gotten overgrown during the years she wasn't herself. She looked at them for a long time. I want to plant something in the spring, she said. Whatever you want, I said. She reached over and put her hand on top of mine. Didn't say anything else. Didn't need to. We've heard from Lester once since sentencing. A letter, 2 pages, handwritten. He said he was sorry. He said it more than once and in more than one way, which I suppose means he meant it. I read it twice and put it in a drawer. I'm not ready to respond yet. Maybe I will be eventually. I don't know. That's an honest answer. Judith drives down from Seattle most weekends now. We have dinner, we talk, we're working through it the way you work through anything. One day, then the next. Dorothy finished 3 crossword puzzles last week, all in pen. Here's what I'd say to any man my age reading this. I spent 35 years checking structures for hidden stress. I know what a failure point looks like before it goes, but I walked past the signs in my own house for over a year because I didn't want to see them. Because the person I would have had to suspect was my son. Love makes you trust what you should question. It makes you explain away what you should examine. The people who run these schemes, and Gloria Denton was not the first and will not be the last, they count on that. They count on a father not looking too closely at a son who says he came home to help. If something feels wrong inside your own house, trust that feeling. Check the weight of what you're being handed. Ask the question that makes you uncomfortable. That's what I should have done sooner. That's what I'm telling you now. The tea kettle I bought that afternoon cost $34. It saved my wife's mind and probably saved my life, which tells you everything you need to know about how close we came to losing both. 35 years I spent making sure other people's structures wouldn't fall. Turns out the most important inspection I ever did was the one I almost didn't do in my own kitchen, in the middle of the night on a bag I had no right to open. If this one stayed with you, subscribe. I post every week, and the next story is one I've been sitting on for a while. And if you've ever had a gut feeling about someone close to you and pushed it aside, drop a comment below. Tell me what happened. You're not alone in that. I read everything you send.